Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mall Walking. In my last video on White Mountain Mall in Rock Springs, I promised that I'd be back to Wyoming to cover Cheyenne's Frontier Mall. So, here we are. I mentioned in that video that Wyoming has just 3 enclosed malls. So, with the completion of this video, I'll officially have covered more than 60% of the state's malls. East Ridge Mall in Casper, I'll be coming for you to round out the trilogy, eventually. I talked a bit about population density in my White Mountain Mall video, stating that Wyoming's is just 6 people per square mile. A little over 500,000 people live here, spread across more than 100,000 square miles. But here in Cheyenne, the state's capital, it's a very different story. With a population density of almost 2,000 people per square mile, around half that of cities like Dallas or Detroit, I expected this mall to be very lively. I was wrong. Full disclosure, continuing my habit of visiting Wyoming malls at the strangest possible times, I stopped by this mall on a Saturday evening. The same evening that the Wyoming Cowboys were taking on longtime rival BYU in nearby Laramie. I don't doubt that this had some impact on the foot traffic. When I wandered around the Jack's outdoor anchor, it was absolutely deserted save for a few employees huddled around a radio that was blaring the game. I always prefer to film in quieter malls anyway, but I totally get it if any locals weigh in saying that this mall is usually much busier. But I also wouldn't be shocked if they say it's always this quiet at weekends. Managed by CBL and Associates, who've owned the mall for a number of decades, Frontier Mall opened back in 1981. Despite its location in Wyoming's capital, it's only the second largest of the state's malls. That honour goes to Casper's East Ridge Mall, which has about 50,000 extra square feet of retail space on this one. When it opened its doors, the mall was anchored by Sears, with other anchors over the years including Sports Authority, Jocelyn's and Dillard's. Fun fact, Jocelyn's was later bought by Dillard's, leaving this mall with 2 Dillard's for a time. 2 Dillard's. Why does that sound like a straight-to-video 80s movie? I'd watch it. Today, all 6 of the mall's anchors are occupied by JCPenney, Dillard's, just the one now, Planet Fitness, Appliance Factory Warehouse, Jack's Outdoor Gear Farm and Ranch, and a pretty sizable Jo-Ann Fabrics. It's an interesting list with a 50-50 split of national chains and smaller retailers. And in fact, that balance is one that carries throughout the mall. We have all wild and western, high country almonds, and dance studios sitting right alongside the likes of Buckle and Victoria's Secret. For the handier folks out there, you can also pick up an above ground hot tub, or sort out your windows and siding. Maybe grab a quick massage after. And there's something powerful in that blend of big brands and mom and pop stores. Let's be frank, in addition to the usual mall killers, the rise of Amazon, big box stores like Target and Walmart, although, another fun fact, the entire state of Wyoming has just 3 Target stores, Frontier Mall has its own unique set of challenges. A smaller city location, the rural economy, and that low population density. All things considered, it's actually doing pretty well. And I suspect that part of that is down to a willingness to embrace non-traditional stores and anchors like Jack's, a family and employee-owned mercantile with 10 locations, mostly in Colorado. Nordstrom and Belk it ain't, but it feels like it works here. It's probably worth me pointing out that you may not be able to consider this a dead mall in the strictest sense of the word. There are lots of empty units, but there are people around, including teens walking the halls and killing time on a Saturday night. You could almost convince yourself it's the 90s again. It retains lots of national retailers, but it has the feel of a mall that's struggling. And that's reflected in some of its Google reviews, which aren't exactly kind. Great if your shopping habits haven't changed since 1995, one says. Makes me sad and old. Not sure we can blame that entirely on the mall. Stuck in the 90s. Is that such a bad thing? And most damning of all, Where's Kyle from GameStop? My best guess would be that Frontier Mall is hovering around the 60% occupancy mark, but some key departures are letting people down. The movie theatre, for example, has vacated the mall, leaving behind these empty, now showing cases that just feel so sad. Then there's this liminal lobby area that looks like something right out of the back rooms. The mall doesn't have a dedicated food court either, just a few scattered inline dining options occupying one corridor. A corridor that's also home to one of those places where you can sign up to join the armed forces, just in case your dinner gets you feeling particularly patriotic. Despite all of those complaints, the mall has some cool tenants that I wanted to highlight. Like this pinball hall and arcade that was selling some vintage cabinets. Too bad I couldn't fit one in my luggage. And this model railroad club headquarters that was locked up tight. Clearly these dudes had something more exciting to do with their Saturday night than I did. Otherwise I'd have gone in and done a little filming. Across the country, we're seeing indoor malls pivot to mixed-use developments and outdoor shopping plazas. With more land than they know what to do with, and bitterly cold winters, those aren't really viable options in Cheyenne. But the city may have an ace in its back pocket. The mall is located a short drive from the Francis E. Warren Air Force Base. Home to more than 3,000 active military members and 5,000 family members, almost 1,000 civilian employees, and another 5,000 military retirees in the area. I can only assume that the mall and downtown Cheyenne both benefit from those steady paychecks and military pensions. The city is also home to Laramie County Community College, which has more than 5,000 students alone, and is pretty close to the University of Wyoming. I wonder how many dorm rooms and off-campus apartments are being furnished from Appliance Factory and Mattress Kingdom. If you squint, it almost feels like an old Sears appliance section in there. So what does the future hold for Frontier Mall? That's difficult to say. It's not immune to any of the difficulties facing White Mountain Mall in Rock Springs, or other malls around the country for that matter. And it's got problems of its own too. Some reviewers complain about a lack of restrooms, just 2 across 500,000 square feet of retail space, staffing issues, and an outdated layout that hasn't changed in more than 40 years. Although frankly, I think the mall looks pretty good. And it still has foot traffic, from aging mall walkers all the way down to kids. In fact, if you believe some complaints about, quote, feral teens online, this place may have a problem with young people. Hence the youth expectation policy which forbids, among other things, gang signs and unnecessary staring. Of course, foot traffic doesn't necessarily translate to sales. And while it's clear that CBL is actively trying to recruit new tenants to the mall, hence all the lease here signs, I've heard people complain that rates are just too expensive for many businesses to justify taking a punt on setting up a shop in here. Still, despite all of that, I was pleasantly surprised by Frontier Mall. Based on what I'd seen online before visiting, I expected to find somewhere in much worse shape. Without dumping on White Mountain Mall too much, as I liked it quite a bit in there, that's the scale and condition I was expecting here. While I won't go full Chris Crocker on it, leave Frontier Mall alone. I do think locals calling for it to be torn down and replaced with something else should be careful what they wish for, because they might not get something this good in its place. As we pause by the selfie station, making sure we're not breaking the youth expectation policy of course, it's just about time for me to wrap up this video, which potentially might be my last video of the year. If that's the case, happy holidays to everyone, and I'll be coming back strong in 2025 with plenty more videos from the backlog. Thanks so much for checking out this video. That rounds out my coverage of Wyoming's malls. at least for as long as it takes to convince myself to get out to Casper to cover Eastridge Mall. But don't hold your breath because it might be a while. If you enjoyed this one, please like, subscribe and share so the YouTube algorithm will give me a boost. My Instagram and some other ways to support what I do are linked below. One last thing before we head out, check out this Five Guys on the right. I've never really seen an inline Five Guys frontage in a mall like that before. And it was just enough to convince me to turn around and get a cheeseburger and Cajun fries. Always a winner. Not sponsored content, but Five Guys, if you see this, hit me up. Until next time, goodbye from Frontier Mall in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Time for me to hit the road.